It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. President Trump is just days away from his expected decision to decertify the Iran nuclear deal to Congress. What does this mean for the Iran nuclear deal, and what does it mean for the world? Well, joining me now is William Beeman, professor of anthropology at the University of Minnesota, who has studied Iran for decades. Professor Beeman, welcome. Your sense of what is going on right now, just today, Iran has threatened to retaliate against the U.S. if it imposes new sanctions, and Trump appears to be pressing ahead with these reports that he's going to tell Congress that Iran is not in compliance.
I think we have to be really careful when we talk about Iran to understand that there are many, many centers of power in Iran. And the so-called threat of retaliation came from the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. It does not speak for the government as a whole.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
the so-called threat of retaliation is not real.
Fair enough. So let's talk about this decision that Trump is apparently about to make when it comes to reporting to Congress. He is about to tell Congress that that he's decertifying Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal, even though everyone knows and agrees with the fact that Iran is in compliance. So what is going on here?
There's no question that Iran has complied fully with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. In fact, a month ago, the president also certified that Iran, in fact, was doing that. This act, the Iran Nuclear Compliance Act of 2015, asks the president to certify that the act is in the national interest of the United States. Therefore, it doesn't have much to do at all with whether Iran is complying with the terms of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. What it has to do with is the United States declaring that Iran's behavior is in some way in accord with American national interests. So the president is allowed to, under this act, to consider all kinds of things, whether Iran is supporting Assad in Syria, whether Iran is testing ballistic missiles, whether Iran is in accord with human rights regulations. There's a whole grab bag, a whole Christmas tree of things that people have been upset with Iran about that have absolutely nothing to do with the JCPOA.
So just to underline that, even though the U.S. has signed on to this Iran nuclear deal, its Congress in 2015 passed a separate measure that would allow it to violate the deal for issues that have nothing to do with the deal itself.
Well, understand that that if the president decertifies the JCPOA as being in the American national interest, this throws the ball back to Congress if he does decertify it. And in that case, Congress would have 60 days to decide whether to reimpose sanctions on Iran. So the president in his decertification, is completely divorced from any reality regarding the JCPOA, responsibility scuttling it. And that's exactly why the administration has said, we are not withdrawing from the JCPOA. They're throwing it back to Congress and letting Congress do the dirty work if they wish to.
Right. And to stress how bipartisan this is, I mean, President Obama did not veto this measure when it was passed. But of course, I don't think he expected Donald Trump to be in the Oval Office. And he also had little choice because it was passed so overwhelmingly by Congress, one could argue. Let me ask you, what potential position does this put the other signatories to the nuclear deal in? Because if the Congress decides to reinstate the old sanctions regime against Iran, wouldn't that then obligate the U.S. to target those who are doing business with Iran? In other words, those who are doing business with Iran as part of the deal that the U.S. initially signed.
The other partners to the agreement, the other negotiators in the agreement, the other P5+1 nations, have made it very clear to the United States that they will not reimpose sanctions themselves.
But what if they face sanctions as a result of the U.S. reinstating its old sanctions against Iran, not just against Iran, but against those who do business with Iran?
the problem, the way that the United States can frustrate anybody doing business with Iran is by saying that the United States banking system cannot be used in transactions with Iran. Already, a number of European nations have found ways to get banking facilities that have no branches or no business in the United States itself. And this is increasingly what will happen. Uh, the United States is actually shooting itself in the foot because what they're doing is inviting nations to bypass the American banking system and the American dollar as an exchange medium in order to be able to continue to do business with Iran. And believe me, business with Iran is extremely lucrative. It's something that the United States should probably think seriously about because Iran has a booming economy. The GDP growth rate in Iran for the last 2 years has been twice what it has been in the United States. Petrochemicals, all kinds of manufacturing facilities, of 74 million people, very well educated, anxious for Western goods, and with resources to be able to actually purchase them. So the United States, if it cuts itself off from Iran with these sanctions, it's not going to do anything to actually limit Iran's economic activity because other nations will continue to will in fact isolate the United States further from the world market.
Okay, so speaking of the world more broadly, if Trump goes ahead with this and if Congress does end up reimposing sanctions, what does that mean for the world?
Well, it means that the United States has once again an absolutely unreliable partner in international agreements, and a complaint on the part of the United States even before the Trump administration. But the Trump administration, in doing this, and not only blowing up this agreement, but also the Paris Accords and many other and trade accords, many other international agreements, where the United States is increasingly isolating itself from the world economy and from the world political situation. More, if the United States wants to reach some kind of an agreement with North Korea, the North Koreans will look at this and say, well, why should we do anything with the United States? Because the United States is not good for standing by its own agreements, by standing by its own word. So we're creating a situation where we are really the unreliable partner in international treaty. For us as a nation, it really is a very, very dangerous precedent for us to set.
Professor William Beeman, Professor of Anthropology at the University of Minnesota, thanks very much.
You're most welcome.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.